All right. Welcome to the live stream, everybody. We are in the pre-show, which is why you get this great shot of me from the back. Thanks for joining us. If you are watching this on the replay, you can fast forward 10 minutes if you'd like, or you can hang out here with us as we welcome people to the chat room, as we check on cameras, we make sure things are working here, our recordings are running, everything looks good. We've got about 10 minutes before we get started on our 220-1001 A+ study group today. We've got questions that I've written. All the details are on the website at professormesser.com/live if you are watching this live. If you are not watching this live, then that link isn't going to help you very much because there's nothing for you to do but hang out. But you can do that. You can just watch things as they go by and register your answers on the screen as you would like. Let's make sure I can see answers on the screen. That looks good. I had taken apart part of the studio because the camera that I use, my primary camera, which you can kind of see in that shot peeking out over this monitor, that camera is one that I use for other things. So it's one of those where I took it apart, took it off the stand, and I was using it elsewhere and brought it back. So I don't do that a lot. So now I had to put everything back together and get all the configurations right. And I think we did it. Well, let's see if we did it. See, that's that camera. I think it worked out okay. I think we got the right settings there, so we're good. At least I think it's working enough to get us through today. So that's how it would work. Hello, chat room. Thanks for being here. Where's everybody checking in from today? Well, obviously, we're here in Florida, trying to stay cool. Here in North Florida, it's very warm out. So we're in the middle of the summer. That's how Shreveport. So Shreveport probably in the same situation I'm in, where everything is melting. It's just so hot outside. Tennessee's here. L.A., not Lloyd Acres, Los Angeles. It's a completely different place. Okay, we don't need our clock anymore. We can bring up, what were we going to bring up? Oh, Keynote. So we can actually show this to you. We've got Middle Tennessee, Vegas. Welcome. There's no login for the chat. Well, you can certainly log in if you'd like. It's down there in the bottom right. You can log in. Arlington, Texas. Or actually, if you're on the chat and you don't see a login, let's see, on the embedded chat, you should be able to pop out the embedded chat and do that as well. There's Arlington, Texas, Athens, Georgia. You're going to go for a run at 5 o'clock in the afternoon in Athens. You have lost your mind. Yes, we'll remember you as well. Garland, Texas, check it in. Nolens is here. We've been kind of lucky here in the hurricane season, which is really just getting underway. But we've been pretty lucky that we haven't had too horrible a time here in the Gulf. We're pretty happy about that. There's Ohio. Columbus also checking in. Phoenix. No, you've reached Fiji. There's San Jose, California. Haven't been out to San Jose in a while. Haven't been out to Tasman Drive in quite some time. Used to go out there every other week. Where do you go to answer questions? If you go to professormesser.com/live, all of your links and everything you need to know will be right there. All of the instructions, and I'll talk about them as well once we get started. This is not the show. So I've had people send me messages saying, I started watching and you really weren't doing anything, so I tuned out. This is the pre-show. I'm not doing anything on purpose. I actually am doing things. I'm making sure that things are working so that when we shift to the live stream, everything will be working. That is ideally how it is supposed to work. Let's be clear. Not exactly how it always turns out, but most of the time it's okay. That's how it works. Another Athens, Georgia checking in. Here's Miami. Just talking about Miami. Used to live in South Florida. Mrs. Professor Messer grew up there. And I lived there for a while. Does the title say July? Well, that would be bad. That would be bad if you were watching the wrong thing. It does say July, doesn't it? Well, we all know what it is. I'll change it once we're done. I can't change it now that we're live. That's what I get for copying and pasting. See, the secret's out. Can I change the info? I don't think I can change the info while it's going. Let's see if I can. Let's see if we can break everything. Shall we? Can I change it to August? Let's see. And if I save changes, does it break everything? I don't know if it will or not, but it says it saved them. We're going to see. Well, it says August. It still says you're there. Still says everything's okay. So we're going to keep going with that. Who knows what's going to happen at that point? I checked my analytics. You're all still here. So that's good. That works. So yes, if you want to answer questions, go to professormesser.com/QA. You don't have to worry about room names or logins or any of that nonsense. That's how it works. Hello, San Antonio. Hello, Orlando is here. Carrollton, Georgia. A lot of folks here in the Southeast. Spring Hill. Haven't been down to Spring Hill in a while either. Used to do a lot of work in the Tampa, St. Pete area. There's Atlanta and Atlanta, as it turns out. Not much in San Antonio, though. Thanks for being here. It's Arkansas. Thanks for being here as well. A lot of us here in the Southeast. I try to time this on a noon start time so that I can get sort of the latecomers of Europe and then the early mornings. I say early mornings, the normal mornings of the west coast of the U.S. So that's why we're kind of spread out that way. So it's nice immediately to see we've got L.A. is here as well as folks here in the Southeast in Arkansas, Mizzou, and Fargo, North Dakota is here. So we've got a nice mix there for the U.S. Haven't seen much of Europe checking in, though. Where is everybody? Oh, it's August. It's August. Europe's on vacation. So that's why. Good for them. Go do that. I just got back from Europe. I went to Europe. I went on a vacation and was there. So if you were in Scotland, you saw me. That's where I went. Went to Scotland, came back. Here we are. So that was it. Yep, that's that is my Cylons down here. They are recording the session. Those are my video recorders. So that's what that and it's nice. It's visual that I can see. Oh yeah, they're running. So that's 2 different video recordings going at the same time. That's why it's sort of circling around 2 different SSDs that I have in this recorder. One of them is recording what you see, the program view, and the other one is recording the other side, the preview, which is what you don't see until I hit a button, and then you see the preview side. So they flip back and forth. So there you go. Yeah, I love cricket. I do like I like a cricket. I like to keep up with it. It's hard to watch cricket in the U.S. We don't get great cricket news. They don't cover it on the television. You don't hear about it. You kind of have to go onto the internet and find everything. It was nice actually being in Scotland, and at least the news would talk about the different tests that were going on, which was kind of nice. Brooklyn's here, Orange County, California. Welcome. Yep, cricket can be. It can be, well, the daily test matches are nice, where you have just a single day and it's good. But yeah, they go on for days. Just what I kind of like about it. Not just a one-time deal. Philly is here. Welcome. Chicago is here. Yeah, I ended up having to go from here to Atlanta to Amsterdam and then to Scotland and back. So I hopped through Amsterdam both times, which was kind of, banging my mic around. We'll get started here in just a couple of minutes. How are we on time? I got rid of my clock and now I can't see anything. We're pretty good. We're about a minute away from getting started. Hopefully, we'll be able to get those things going. Yeah, the T20 tests are really fun to watch when I can watch them. So I'm like a cricket fan from the outside, a cricket fan for somebody who doesn't have access to watch cricket. So there you go. That's we'll have to tour this configuration here eventually. I think we're at a point where I actually could do that. Let's play a thing. There we go. Get that. You can answer questions now. It's all set to go. I usually set these things up about 10, 15 minutes before so you can get into professormesser.com/QA and answer the question. You're welcome to do that. Pop quizzes, daily pop quizzes are already for the 1001. I don't have any of the ones on my site that are 1000 yet, but I am going to make some because we've got a nice mix of 1000 series that we have created since January timeframe that I think we now could put in because it's really replays from the study groups that go in there. So I am planning that. In the meantime, though, it's about ready to get started. Let's go with our study group for today. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the August 2019 Professor Messer 2001, the 220-1001 A+ study group. For those of you watching replays of these and you're going back to back and watching, it's like I was never gone. And yet now you can see I'm barely able to speak because I've been off on vacation. I've come back and now we're having a study group. So we're going to see how this goes. But I have all new questions for you today from the 220-1001 A+ certification exam. We're going to step through a lot of different questions that I have, and we're going to step through a lot of different Q&A in this first hour. And then for the second hour, I just open up the phone lines. You're welcome to call in and ask any question you would like. So we've got that for you as well. I've got a lot of details to go through today. Here's our study group details and the information that you'll need. Don't forget that we're able to do these study groups thanks to your ongoing support of watching the videos we have online. Many of you realize that all of our videos are available to watch online for free. There's no charge to watch any of our training videos. I don't hide them behind some type of paywall. They're not hidden in some way or restricted in any way. Every minute of every video is available for you to watch. Some people like to have an offline version. I have some available for sale, not only in a video, but also in audio form. You can find that at professormesser.com/1000videos. So we've got plenty to talk about today. I'm going to, sometime in this first hour, give you a secret code and some instructions on how you could earn a CEU that is a digitally signed email from me. So if you're somebody who's collecting CEUs, and I realize there's a diminishing number of people doing that now that they're CertMaster CE, but some of you still are. And if you are collecting CEUs, just listen in during this first hour and we will talk about that. If you don't know what continuing education units are, you can pop over to the CompTIA website. It will tell you all about those. And if you don't have your A+ yet, then you don't have to worry about that right now. This is the first month that we have now been able to say that the 900 series A+ exams are no longer with us, at least for English-speaking people who are taking English language exams. Those English language exams were retired on July 31st. So if you are someone who is currently studying from materials that have on them the 220-901 or the 220-902, you have the wrong materials. You should have materials now that specify the 220-1001 or the 220-1002. These are certification exams that have been around since January. A lot of people think that they were just introduced because the 900 series went away. But in actuality, there was an overlap period. So back in January, the 1000 series exams were available. So I, of course, recommend that you have study materials that match the current version of the exam. Now, if you're familiar with the 900 series, the 1000 series exams are structured and have the same requirements as the 900 series. So the 220-1001, you need to get a 675 on a scale of 100 to 900. And on the 1002, you need to get a 700 on a scale from 100 to 900. So there's a lot you need to know. There's about a 20% difference in topics, though, which means if you're studying for your 900 series books and you go in to take a 1000 series exam, 20% of the content will be something you didn't study. That's a pretty big percentage if you're worried about your score on an exam. So I highly recommend you get the latest exam materials. Pretty important to be able to do that. That's one of those that does become important when you sit down in the exam. You may think 20% isn't much until you're in the room and you realize 20% is a significant difference on the new topics for the 220-1001 and the 220-1002. Those are statistics I gathered by listing out every single topic in the exam objectives and comparing them topic by topic and quantitatively measuring how many of those topics on the new exam did not exist in the old version. 21% on the 1001, 23% on the 1002 as I count exam objectives. So you're welcome to do that yourself, but it comes out to about 20%. That's a pretty big number. We're going to talk about the 1001 and the 1002 exams. Today, it's going to be just 1001. You can tune in again on Thursday, and I do another one of these study groups for the 1002 exam. So today, we're going to focus on mobile devices, networking, hardware, virtualization and cloud computing, and hardware network troubleshooting. These exams are stay very close to those topics. There's not a lot of overlap between these exams. They're all really self-contained. So you should be able to study for your 1001, take that exam, and then you can kind of push that off to the side and really focus on the next exam. At least that's how I recommend that you do that. We've got these courses available, as I mentioned. Maybe something you want to look at. You can go out to professormesser.com/download 1001 for more details on the 1001 and 1002 exams. If you are watching this on a video live, this is one where you're also able to watch the replay of the video on my website. But a number of you would like to have an audio version of this that you can listen to after the fact. And so I have a podcast flavor of this study group available by going to professormesser.com/podcast. So that's a place you can go to be able to get audio. You can have it download into your podcast catching program. There's a lot that you can do there. So make sure you go out to podcast and you're able to subscribe to that. Also, before we get started, I'll let you know that about a day after this, my marketing manager, Lori, will go through this entire study group and she will create timestamps for everything that's here. So you're able to go back at least over the last year or more now of our study groups, and you can look at the YouTube video description on youtube.com and you're able to jump to any part of the study group. She does a great job with those. Lori, thanks for doing that. We've got all of those, and when you go back and look at the replays later, you'll have those available. So if you're thinking, I need to get through this quickly, or I would like to jump to a particular thing I remember hearing about, that would be a good place to do it. Today, we're going to ask questions and answer questions. You will answer them, I will ask them. So I've got questions all ready for you. Here's how you will join us. You will go to professormesser.com/QA. This is if you're watching live. If you're not watching live, then you can follow along on the video, but you won't be able to interactively answer these questions. You can also go to the app that is the Socrative student app. If you would like the app on your mobile device, it will ask you for a room name. Make sure you type in the room name, all one word, as Professor Messer, and make sure you spell it right, PROFESSORMESSER. Those have to be spelled properly or you won't see the question that's waiting for you in the room, and there's one waiting for you right now. If you followed those instructions, you would see a question that asks, a system administrator has been asked to configure email connectivity on a mobile phone. The email provider documentation requires port TCP 993 to be open to receive mail. Which protocol should be configured on the phone? And then you'll be able to answer that question. If I bring it up on my screen so you can see it, here we go. You have this option of A, SNMP, B, IMAP-S, C is POP, D is PGP, and E is SMTP. Those are your 5 options. You can lock in your answer, hit the submit button. Remember what you answered, because it doesn't tell you once you submit it. I don't know what that's about, but there it is. And then this is something, by the way, you may remember this question from last month. This is our study group rewind question so that we can get into the Q&A. We know that we're in and able to answer the questions properly. So if you're someone who's never seen this before, you probably weren't watching last month. I have a feeling some of you were watching this last month. Our primary goal here is to get you accustomed to the front end. But of course, as we go through these questions, make sure you don't answer the questions in the chat room. Please don't put any hints in the chat room. We're going to answer these questions as if we are sitting in the room for the very first time, sitting there and having to answer this without any type of resource whatsoever. So that may be something you can run into and use as you're going through this. So this TCP 993 is the right one. That's the real key that you want to focus on. TCP 993 is IMAP-S. That is the secure version of IMAP. IMAP running over SSL, which is Secure Socket Later, which I know is TCP. It's not SSL anymore. We always try to focus on what the latest technologies are. And for some reason, instead of calling TLS the latest version of the encryption, which it is, we still call it SSL. And that's one of those weird idiosyncrasies. So folks are saying, yeah, no, it's TLS. It's not SSL, but we still call it SSL. We just all know in the back of our minds, we really mean TLS. It's not really SSL. So that's the way to do it. So that's how you can go about doing this. If you're trying to figure out where that question was, you can always find the link at professormesser.com/live, or you can simply go to professormesser.com/QA. I agree, SSL rolls off the tongue much better. So you've got very, very much a good focus now on how to get through these questions. We're going to roll through some of these A+ questions and see how we do. One of the things that you may not realize on the actual A+ exam is that the first set of questions you get on the exam are not multiple choice. You should absolutely be ready for this, because you'll sit down for your exam and suddenly you're faced with questions that pop you into a command prompt. It might ask you to do matching. There may be fill in the blank. You may have to put things in a particular order from highest to lowest, fastest to slowest. You're never quite sure exactly what it's going to be, but those are what CompTIA calls performance-based questions. The first question of every study group is a performance-based question. So you can go back over the last year of study groups. I tend to rotate the style of question through, although I change the content every year, but I have the same style of question every month. So you can go back at least till February of this year for the 1000 series, and the first question of every study group is a performance-based question. So I have a performance-based question for you today. Get ready for this one. This is one you will need to fill in to be able to have that here. And this one, I want you to match the interface to the description. So for those of you listening in on the podcast, this is more of a visual question. This will be a difficult one to deal with. So I have 5 different interfaces on the screen. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I guess my numbers are not up. Let's give numbers next to these. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. There's our 5 numbers. So for these 5 devices, these 5 interfaces, I have 5 descriptions. And the descriptions are an internal SSD storage drive, stereo speakers, a network connection, an external video display, and an external storage drive. Now you'll notice I'm not asking you what the name of the interface is. This is the one that I want. You'll see this a lot in the exam. I want you to have the same style of question in these study groups as you might get on the actual exam. And CompTIA loves to do this. They love to give you a question, but ask you how that particular technology is used, not the name of the technology. They're never going to ask you for a particular abbreviation, what that abbreviation means. They don't care if you've memorized the letters and what the names are that go with the letters. They want you to know how that technology is used. In fact, we rarely use the names in what we do these days. So make sure you're familiar with those types of things. Like anything else, we're going to be looking at this as if we're sitting for the exam. If you want to answer the question, you go right down here to the bottom to professormesser.com/QA, and you can lock in the answer. Now, if you think they're in the same order with both sides, you can simply answer there 1A, 2B, 3C, 4D, and 5E. Now, that's not the answer, of course, but you can simply put in the letters and numbers and match those up, because this is a fill in the blank when you go online to professormesser.com/QA. I'm watching folks put the answers in now. A lot of you are doing very good with this one. You're getting a pretty good idea of how this particular configuration would work. This is one where you do run into this challenge sometimes. In fact, I think I might have, I'm looking through the different options here to it, how I would work through these things. In fact, some of them I could even duplicate a little bit. We'll go through and see how we do. Yeah, number 4 is an odd one, isn't it? People are looking at these and trying to figure out what those interfaces are, which, by the way, is what you'll run into in your actual job. You'll look at the back of a computer and wonder, whoa, what was that? I'm not quite sure where that was and what it came from. And in fact, the 4th one there, I talked about 20% of the exam having new content on the exam. Number 4 is some new content. So that is one of those things that you have to do. So make sure you're aware of that when you go through and look at all of these. So hopefully that would be something you can do. Let's see how we did now. A lot of you have locked in your answers with this one. Let's break this down and see how you did with all of these. Let's start with, let's see if I can bring these up. The first one, number 1, is a mini DisplayPort option. This could also be Thunderbolt. but I went with mini DisplayPort on this one, so I will give you credit if you chose either what I chose, the external video display, letter D. So you can also go through and look at the option for that mini DisplayPort. If you thought that was a Thunderbolt, because the early Thunderbolt versions, exactly the same interface. Not just looks the same, they are exactly the same interface. So if you think that mini DisplayPort was a Thunderbolt, I would give you credit for external storage drive too. I think that was a good option. Either external video or storage, because Thunderbolt will do both of those too. So if you chose either D or E, I'll give you credit on that one. So we'll give you a little bit more for that one. You'll be able to understand exactly how that works. Let's see what other options would be available on here as well. We're going to go through these and have a look. We're not quite finished with the answers. Once we are, we can always figure out what those were. The second one is, no question about that one, no ambiguity there, is C. That's a network connection, Ethernet network connection specifically. You can see the 5 interface pins on the middle, and you can see the different, even has lit the LED lights on it, so you know what link state might be. You can see if there's any activity lights. Those are always useful to have. And so 2 would be C, Ethernet. That's your network connection. Now, the third one, a lot of you were going back and forth over what this one could be. That red connector there is a SATA connector. It looks so close to being a DisplayPort connector, doesn't it? But the DisplayPort is actually the U-shape interface in the middle. A SATA is that L interface that's in the middle. So you do have to know the difference between those when you're looking at them, but they are very, very similar. So if you're looking at SATA and it's one of those internal SATA connectors, it could really only be A, the internal SSD storage drive. The eSATA, which would be the external version of SATA, has a different style of interface. It's a different shape. So not quite an eSATA. It's definitely the internal SATA connector. Let's look at the fourth one. The fourth one could almost be so many different things. Some of you in the chat room were mentioning this. That is a USB-C connector. And a USB-C connector could also be used for Thunderbolt. There might be Thunderbolt going through that. It may not be USB. USB-C is the type of interface connection, but not necessarily describing the signal going over that connection. This is one of the challenges we have when we introduce these new technologies, is that it puts a little twist on things. So USB-C is the type of connector, which could be USB serial data over it. It could be Thunderbolt that's going across that connection. So absolutely it could run, people in the chat room, so I can do stuff with this, right? I could run external video. Yes, you can if it's a Thunderbolt connector. I don't know if anybody's running video over USB-C. It certainly could be done. The most common use of USB-C from this list is probably E, and external storage drive. But if you chose external video display, because this could be a Thunderbolt connector, you could also choose that as well. If you had an adapter, I guess you could do a network connection. You probably wouldn't plug speakers into it, and it would not be used for an internal storage drive. So on that one, I think we can give you D and E would be the valid answers as well. Either one of those I would accept for that particular answer. So that's a good option. And the last one are TRS connectors. Tip ring sleeve is what TRS stands for. Those TRS connectors, almost universally stereo speakers, analog audio output for those. Pretty useful to have that. So hopefully that's one that's pretty common. That one would certainly be the stereo speakers. You could lock that one down. Now, I gave you some interfaces here with a lot of different options on them. We weren't locking you down to any particular answer. And on some of these answers, I would have accepted one or another answer. Obviously, on your exam, the questions that you're going to get will have very definitive answers. You're not going to get any that are vague or ambiguous like this one was. But I wanted to give you an idea of thinking through what some of these things might be and be able to operate through them that way. The thing that I find, though, on the exam, and a lot of people are asking about this, is, well, on this question, we might have gotten some of these right and some of these wrong. Do you get partial credit? And CompTIA has in their frequently asked questions on their website, they've said, if you're wondering if we give partial credit, the answer is maybe. Not an answer, but that's what they tell you on the website. That's what they tell you. It's maybe, sort of. You could, or you might not. So we aren't quite sure on the exam how they grade it, and they're not going to tell us how they grade it. So you do run into that as well. Yeah, folks in the chat room are going, yeah, I use USB-C as video display. And in fact, I do as well here in the studio. The USB-C, I'm running Thunderbolt over that. My external display is a USB-C as well. So very common to have that. Also running USB-C to running Thunderbolt over USB-C to the old style mini display port kind of connector for Thunderbolt that is an external storage. So I'm doing both D and E in my studio with that USB-C type connection. So a very universal connector. That was the idea behind the creation of that connector, that it would be something we could use for many, many different utilities, and maybe that was a good one to use. So if you got all of these correct, or you at least you stepped through them and understood what the possible answers could be, you probably did pretty well. You're probably ready for those interfaces on your exam. So hopefully, if you aren't familiar, you can go back, have a look at those interfaces, and get a little more familiarity with those before you walk into your exam. Let's do a multiple choice question. Let's shift gears and do one that's we don't have to answer or match or fill in the blank or any of those. So we'll shift gear out of our performance-based questions, and we'll ask this question that says, what type of Bluetooth security feature ensures that the pairing process is only occurring between two specific systems? What type of Bluetooth security feature ensures that the pairing process is only occurring between two specific systems? Is it encryption? Is it username and password? Is it PIN? Is it biometrics? Or is it swipe pattern? Those are your 5 options. And if you think you know what those options are, you can go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. What type of Bluetooth security feature ensures that the pairing process is only occurring between two specific systems? Is it encryption, username and password, PIN, biometrics, or a swipe pattern? Those are your 5 answers. Hopefully you'll know what one of those 5 are. Obviously, Bluetooth is something that's on the exam, and Bluetooth security is something that's on the exam. So you should absolutely know what those are. A lot of you were locking in your answers very quickly for that one. I was watching the numbers go up very, very quickly. So that gives me an idea that maybe you do know what those answers happen to be for this one. It might be something that you're familiar with in getting those there. Let's see how you're doing. I'm going to give you a couple more seconds to get that one locked in to be able to get those. Socrative will not show you the answers at the end. I will show you the answers at the end. So keep watching for that. You'll be able to see. And oh, you mean at the very end of what we're doing? No, Socrative won't show you the answers there either for those. And being able to get that. This is one where we should be able to work through this. I think that hopefully you do know this for the exam as well. Let's have a look at how you answered, though. Let's click the how do we do. And 85% of you chose PIN. It seems like an overwhelming number, but is that the right number? We're going to find out in a moment. 8% of you said encryption. 4% of you said username and password. 3% of you said biometrics. And nobody said a swipe pattern. So that's an interesting one. So what is it? Well, if we look at the Bluetooth pairing process, you do have to know this pairing process for your exam. Pairing process starts with enabling Bluetooth on both sides. Obviously, you won't be able to connect with Bluetooth unless both devices are talking Bluetooth. Then you set one of those devices, or in some cases both of them, to discoverable mode. You may have to put in a special set of keys to do this, especially if it's an earpiece where there's not a lot of buttons. You may have to hold certain buttons down to do that and be able to have that there. Then the other device, it will show, oh, there's the earpiece that you just turned on to be discoverable. Let me select that. And at that point, when you select it, your screen will pop up a message and say, you need to confirm or type in a PIN number that matches the PIN number on the other device. This is the check that makes sure that nobody else is able to discover and use that device as well, because you have to confirm that PIN number on both sides. Plug that in. And ideally, you would be the only one who could see the PIN number on the device or read the PIN number off the device to be able to do that. And then finally, you've got connectivity. You can test it and make sure the Bluetooth pairing process is working properly. So that's where you can go for all of those. And that's why the 85% of you that chose PIN, yep, that's correct. That is the right one to be able to do that. It's not the other options. Encryption is used in Bluetooth, but during the pairing process, that is not what ensures that it's only occurring between two specific systems. It's the PIN and your humanness connecting with that PIN number that is doing it. So that's pretty useful. Username and password is not used in the Bluetooth pairing process. Thankfully, we would never get Bluetooth paired if we had to have a username and password. We type it in wrong. No one would be able to do that. Very difficult. So this is biometrics, also not used. Imagine how much these devices would cost if we had to embed biometrics into these Bluetooth devices just to be able to connect an earpiece to my phone. That doesn't make much sense. It's not that level of security that we need. And finally, a swipe pattern. Swipe pattern, very useful for an unlocking on your phone, but not very useful to be able to pair a couple of Bluetooth devices for that. A PIN, by the way, is a personal identification number. For those of you wondering, what do you mean a PIN? Like a writing pin? Like a stick pin? No. Like a personal identification number is what that PIN is. It's the number you have to type in to be able to gain access. And a relatively simple security measure and a relatively useful one when you're trying to pair Bluetooth devices together. We use pins all the time, don't we? If you're at an ATM machine, we use a PIN number. Why do we do that? But that's what we do. It's the Department of Redundancy department. We've got 85% of you were spot on with that. If you did choose CPIN, that's the right answer. And if you are wondering about the pairing process and you're not familiar with the pairing process, always go back and have a look at that. It is in the CompTIA exam objectives. Let's do another question. I've got one for you. Since we're talking security, let's do this question that says, Sam, a network administrator, is configuring a firewall to allow file transfers to occur between macOS computers. Which of the following should Sam configure to allow this traffic? And if you think you know the answer, you'd like to answer this, go to professormesser.com/QA. The question again, Sam, a network administrator, is configuring a firewall to allow file transfers to occur between macOS computers. Which of the following should Sam configure to allow this traffic? Should it be UDP 161, TCP 143, TCP 443, TCP 548, or TCP 3389? Those are your 5 different options. Sam is configuring a firewall. She wants to allow file transfers between these devices. Which of these should Sam configure to allow this traffic? Is it UDP 161, TCP 143, TCP 443, TCP 548, and TCP 3389? And to complicate things further, these are all port numbers from the CompTIA exam objectives. You should be able to go through each one of these port numbers and know what they are used for. And there are others that you need to know. They're all listed in the CompTIA exam objectives. Hopefully you're familiar with this as well. This is also a common question technique on the exam where they're not telling you what protocol is used by the port numbers or vice versa. They want you to know how these port numbers are used. So that's a good way to go about doing this. If you think you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA. You can lock in your answer and be able to see what that happened to be for this. This is one where I sat down this weekend and was putting these questions in. And of course, I was using a Mac OS. I was transferring files and thinking, we need to make sure we know how to do this because you're probably going to set up a firewall at some point, and I don't want you to block my traffic. I need to be able to transfer these files and be able to do that. Hopefully, you're familiar with how to do that. Let's see how you did for this. I'm going to click the How Do We Do button. It's kind of a mixed bag, although 47% of you is the highest number we got. The plurality of you said a TCP 548. And then it's sort of a tie for second or third. The next highest was 21% said TCP 443. 13% of you said TCP 143. 9% said UDP 161, and 8% said TCP 3389. Those are the different options. So if we go with the plurality here, TCP 548. Most of you did say TCP 548. Hopefully that's one that you're familiar with when we get into those. But now we have to break down this question and see if that really was the right answer. So our question said that we're configuring a firewall. We're doing file transfers between Mac OS. And if you ever run into a question where it's saying Mac OS and file transfers, then it is probably using the built-in protocol in Mac OS called AFP, or Apple Filing Protocol. The default TCP port number for the Apple Filing Protocol, or the default protocol and port number, is TCP 548. A lot of people have asked if you should just remember the number. Shouldn't I just remember 548 and I'm done? Actually, there is a UDP 548, which may or may not have anything to do with Apple Filing Protocol. So keep in mind that the TCP port number and the UDP port number are completely different entities that could be supported and serviced by completely different applications. So make sure that you know the difference between a TCP port and a UDP port as it relates to the well-known ports and protocols that are in the exam objectives. I don't even think that CompTIA does a very good job on their exam objectives of breaking those out. Sometimes they'll just list port numbers, which is part of the problem. But don't do that. You need to know in actual use whether 548 is a port number that's being used by TCP or whether it's being used by UDP. They are completely different animals. So make sure you know about that. This file transfer, this filing protocol works with another protocol in macOS called the SLP, which is the Service Location Protocol. If you're in macOS, you can bring up a list of all of the other devices on the network. This is one of the protocols that allows you to be able to populate that list. And of course, you're going to be doing some type of file management with AFP, Apple Filing Protocol. If you ever use Windows and you're in the Windows File Manager and you're moving files around from one machine to another, it's the same thing except it's in macOS. Think of it that way. So using AFP and SLP are primarily used in macOS. You won't see SLP being used in Windows. You won't see AFP being used in Windows. But there are some places that do allow you to do that. And there are other types of protocols that you can use. But if you're an Apple and you're using macOS, you're in good shape if you use AFP between two different Apple devices. Now, you can also in macOS transfer files to a Windows machine. And if you're doing that, it's not going to use AFP. It's going to use SMB, Server Message Block, because that's the filing protocol that Windows devices expect. So you have to keep that in mind. Sometimes you're using multiples of those to different machines on your network. Of course, that's all happening behind the scenes and you never know it. So if you did answer TCP 548, that's absolutely correct. 20% of you said TCP 443, which is SSL. It's not SSL. That's not a macOS file transfer, at least by default. That's not what it's using. 13% of you said TCP 143. If you're doing some email, maybe you are using TCP 143, but this was not an email situation. This was file transfer. You got 9% said UDP 161, which would be SNMP, Simple Network Management Protocol. Definitely not UDP 161. We're doing file transfers, not managing devices. And lastly, 8% said TCP 3389. That's remote desktop. And that is not what we were doing. We were transferring files, not remotely viewing someone's desktop. Yeah, FTP, SMB, AFP, all of them are different protocols used for different things in different operating systems for different purposes. FTP and SMB are not interchangeable. Those are very different protocols used for very different reasons in those operating systems. So make sure you're familiar with those as well. So if you did answer D, TCP 548, you got it absolutely right. Well done with that. Well, I want to take a moment and let you know that on the exam are tons of little details like that. A lot of specifics. And they are all in these 1001 and 1002 videos that I've created. And of course, I highly recommend you watch every single one of the videos. You write down everything you need to know from every single one of these videos. But there's a lot of videos and they deal with so many different topics: hardware, operating systems, printers, security, networking, and mobile devices. So much information that's in there. And you may not have time to go through every single video and write down every little bit of notes that you might need. So what I have done is I've done that for you. I've gone through every single video. I've listed out every single bit of detail that I could get from every single one of these, and I put it into my course notes. These are my 221,001 and 221,002 course notes. Here's a copy of them on my screen right now. I'm going to flip through. This is the 1001 course notes, and they are, I think, 58 pages long. So every single video has a lot of detail. You can't see the USB-C that's up here at the top. We just talked about USB-C to be able to do that. And you've got all of the detail, all the little graphics, all of the specifics from all of those videos are in here. They are available for you to see. I've also got not just this digital version. I'm knocking stuff over in my studio. Not just this digital version. I've got a physical version too. Here it is. Same course notes, same information. It's just in this printed form. So it's the same screens you were just seeing, the same information that you just saw on there, but now it's in this full color printed view. It's got plenty of information. It's exactly the same as the digital version. It's just a physical version of the course notes. So you're welcome to choose either one of those. If you do purchase the physical version, I'll ship you this version, and then you also get the digital one for free. So I try to combine those together. You can get whatever format you like. They are identical. There's nothing different in one or the other. I just want you to have whatever type of edition that works for you. Some people like to have a physical book. I get it. So I'll make a physical version. Some of you like digital only. I got a digital only version for you as well. You can find out more about that at professormesser.com/1000notes and learn about those 1000 notes to be able to do that. It's one of those where when you run into needing that information, needing it quickly, that's a great way to go about doing it. And every dollar of this goes back to keeping this whole craziness going. This amazing experiment that has escaped the lab and making these videos available for you for free. And this is something that you are supporting. So thank you so much for your purchase of the notes and your ongoing support of the website. It really does go a long way to keep things going here, and I really do appreciate it. Let's do another question for you. Well, first in the chat room, some folks were saying, I mentioned 443 was SSL. Some of you were saying, I thought that was HTTPS. Effectively the same thing. Whenever you hear the term HTTPS, that's HTTP over SSL. So usually we'll sometimes abbreviate that and say, oh, you're running SSL over that connection. That's what we refer to there. So don't be thrown by that. That's a pretty normal thing to be able to do that. And some of you are trying to figure out SMB versus FTP. That can be a challenge as well. There are minor differences between those, actually some major differences as well. But SMB is what Windows devices use to transfer files. AFP is what Mac OS devices use to transfer files. And then FTP is kind of a generic version that you could use across multiple types of operating systems that is not operating system specific. So that would be one of those scenarios. SMB and the AFP, those protocols, not just for file sharing or transferring files or changing the file systems, they can also be used to be able to connect to printers and print things out on the network. So that's another way to consider that as well. Let's do some more questions, though. Let's go back to this list and have this. The next question, oh, we're back to Apple again. We're doing a lot of Apple this time. The question asks, what protocol is commonly used by Apple products to locate music, photos, and other resources? What protocol is commonly used by Apple products to locate music, photos, and other resources? The answer may not be what you're thinking because your options are Explorer, Locator, Bonjour, Discovery, and Finder. Those are your 5 options: Explorer, Locator, Bonjour, Discovery, and Finder. Those are the 5 different protocols. We got away from the TCP and UDP port numbers, didn't we? Thankfully. So now we have to figure out which one of those protocols is commonly used by Apple products to locate music, photos, and other resources. If you think you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA. So some of you in the chat room are saying, I don't deal with Mac. Well, for the A+ exam, you're going to deal with Mac. There's plenty of Mac OS on the exam, so make sure that you're familiar with that. If you go to and have a look at the different options in the exam objectives, you will see Mac OS comes up a lot. Make sure you're familiar with that so that you can absolutely go to this list and know, what should I know about macOS? It's all listed in the exam objectives. Go download those objectives. They'll tell you everything. Some people will come to me and say, I'm about to take my exam. I'm still not quite sure if I should, on my exam, know a certain topic. Well, at this point, there should be no question whether you should know that or not, because it's all in the exam objectives. Make sure that you know about that. And of course, that's one you're going to run into. If you're in a corporate environment these days, it's no longer just Windows. You're going to get a mix of different things. So make sure you're familiar with those. When you work with Mac OS, Linux, Windows, you need to know all three, and all three of those are in your CompTIA exam. So make sure you're familiar with those. Let's see how we did with this one. What protocol is commonly used by Apple products to locate music, photos, and other resources? We're a little torn. So we can see that we have 48% said Finder, 40% said Bonjour, and then 5% said Discovery, 5% said Locator, and 2% said Explorer. So this is the real question, is how is that possible? Which one of these could it be? We know if we go with the main list of people, said 48% said Finder and 40% said Bonjour. So it's kind of like a 50-50 between those, pretty much. It's got to be one or the other, right? Being able to work through those. Whenever we talk about the different ports and different capabilities, they are the one that is a protocol in this list is Bonjour. That is the one where you're able to discover Apple devices out on the network and be able to work through them. This is the one whenever I try to start figuring out which one to use, that's the one you do have to know about. You do have to be familiar with when you start looking at what are the protocols running behind the scenes. That's what we're going to use. So that's the one where you do have to be familiar with that. And if you're running Windows, for example, and you've loaded iTunes, you may know that Bonjour is running behind the scenes so that it can find your phones out on the network, so that it can transfer that information out on the network. But many of you answered, 46% of you, the plurality of you, chose Finder. And Finder is a very useful front end for your file system in Mac OS. It is what you think of as the File Explorer or the Windows Explorer in Windows. Finder is the Mac OS version of that on a Mac. So if you need to transfer files, see what's in a directory, move things between folders, load information up between drives, you use Finder to do that. But Finder is a utility. It's an executable in Mac OS. It is not a protocol. And the question specifically asked you for a protocol commonly used by Apple products to locate music, photos, and other resources. Bonjour is what it's using. It's going out and trying to find these devices and say hello. And that's exactly what you would find in Mac OS to be able to do that. So in this case, those of you that answered C, Bonjour, 42% of you got that one absolutely right. If you did answer Finder, you were close. You were on the right track. You were thinking the right way. It's just that the Finder was not a protocol. Couldn't do anything with that one to be able to work through it. So that's a little bit of a challenge, but that's okay. We can make it up on the next one. Don't worry about it. If you didn't get it right, now you know. In fact, it doesn't do any good for everybody to get the answers right. If 100% of you were getting these answers correct, this study group wouldn't be very good, wouldn't be very useful to you. So this is a very good opportunity for now understand what Bonjour is, to know how it works on the network, to know when you might use it, and now you'll know if that ever comes up on the exam. Let's do another question. We got time for more. Yeah, let's do another question on this one. Here's the next question for you that asks, I'll click the next button here. A manufacturing company is moving their applications to a cloud service accessible to everyone over the internet. Which of these would best describe this cloud model? Which of these would best describe this cloud model? Your options are hybrid, private, community, public, or internal. This is the one you do have to know. Those are your 5 options. So a manufacturing company is moving their applications to a cloud service accessible to everyone over the internet. Which of these would best describe this cloud model? Would it be hybrid, private, community, public, or internal. Those are your 5 options. As you may be familiar, on the 1000 series exams, cloud-based technologies have been added. And as I mentioned, 20% of the exam is new. This is part of that 20%. So if you have been studying for your 900 series and you're thinking, I've never heard of this, this is one that you may have run into. This is one you could have been familiar with. So hopefully this is one you've run into as well. Whenever you start thinking about cloud models and how they operate, maybe that's one you're familiar with. This is, by the way, if you're someone who has studied from the Network Plus exam objectives or the Security Plus exam objectives, you may realize CompTIA, all they did was copy and paste from those. So you should be very familiar with these cloud-based services if you've studied Network Plus or Security Plus. So that might be a little help to some of you that have been going through this, trying to figure it out. Let's see how we've done. A lot of you are taking a little bit more time on this one to be able to answer this one. When you know it, I always see the numbers crank up very, very quickly. On this one, not quite as quick to be able to do that. Let's see how we do with this one. A manufacturing company moving their applications to a cloud service accessible to everyone on the internet. Which of these would best describe this cloud model? 73% of you said public. 12% said community. 8% said private. 5% hybrid. 2% internal. It's a vast majority of you. I'll say 73% is a vast majority. It's certainly a very strong majority of you said public. But is it really? Well, private cloud would be one that we create usually in our own data center, but it's one that is private to us. Nobody else would have access to anything that we build in a private cloud. Doesn't quite fit the answer that we have here. The other one is a public cloud. The polar opposite of the private is public, which means we have taken these cloud-based services and we have made them accessible to anybody that might be on the internet. And that is the one that makes a lot of sense to what we were just talking about, is a public cloud. Whenever we talk about these services on the internet and these large companies like Amazon, Microsoft, Rackspace, they have these large public clouds. That's the one we're talking about, that anyone can access it. Of course, if you're on Professor Messer website right now, you're on my public cloud service. That's all cloud-based systems that you're running on and able to use. And everybody on the internet, for the most part, is able to access those public cloud services. It's a public deployment. A hybrid would be a little bit of a mix. You might have some of those resources that are dedicated for internal use. Some of those resources may be dedicated for external use, or there may be some links between those two. And in those cases, it's not just private, it's not just public, it's a combination, it's a hybrid whenever we see those. And lastly, a community cloud deployment is where a lot of organizations get together and build their own cloud for their own purposes, and it's shared resources. So community resource would not apply in this case either. We were talking about a single company and using cloud-based resources that are available by anybody on the internet. The answer is indeed D, public. 72% of you got that one absolutely correct. If you are watching these videos for continuing education credit, one of the things that you can do is simply send that information off to CompTIA, but sometimes it's nice to have something that can be audited. So if you follow these instructions, I will send you a digitally signed email that says that you must have watched this because you followed these instructions to be able to earn this email message. What you want to do is go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website. There is a Contact Us link in both of those places. You can click either one of those. And in there, it will ask for your name, your email address. Make sure it's a correct email address because I will be emailing this to you. And it will ask you for a subject for this contact link. And if you could put that this is the August 2019 221,001 A+ study group, that helps me a lot. And you can also in there, and you must somewhere, maybe in the text of the message, put very plainly cloud service. That's your secret word of the month, cloud service. That's what I'm looking for. Please don't hide it in a message somewhere. Sometimes people will write a whole paragraph of information and somehow fit the word in there. Now you're making it more difficult for me. Sometimes I'm able to find them and send them back. I think sometimes I might have deleted the message because I just don't see anything there, and then realize later, hey, maybe they were just hiding it in there, which doesn't do any of us any good, by the way. I have to go through quite a few of these, and if you can make it very plain, cloud service is the word that's helpful. They do want to test me, and it does test me. Sometimes I get the question right. Sometimes I get the question wrong. If you're testing me, you should know I'm not a very good test taker. That may hurt you when it comes to this. And I want you to get these these digitally signed emails back to you. So let's try to make it as easy as possible on both of our sides, and that'll get it to you as quickly as possible too. To have that there. Public was the right answer with this one, though. D, public, was the right one. Let's do some troubleshooting now. This is one of the most challenging parts of the exam for many of you, is trying to run through these troubleshooting scenarios they give you. So let's run through this troubleshooting scenario and see how you do. The question asks, when starting a computer, this message is displayed. Quote, the smart check has detected an imminent failure. Which of the following should be the next troubleshooting step? So that's your challenge, is that you've started the computer, a message is displayed, the smart check has detected an imminent failure. Which of the following should be the next troubleshooting step? Is it run a hard drive diagnostic? Is it back up the storage drive? Is it run the system file checker tool? Is it start Windows in safe mode? Or is it disconnect all USB connected storage devices? Those are your 5 options. Is it run a hard drive diagnostic, back up the storage drive, run the system file checker tool, start Windows in safe mode, or disconnect all USB connected storage devices? Do you think you know the answer? Go to professormesser.com/QA. Some of you in the chat room are saying, I don't know what the answer is. Not familiar with this message. I don't know what it's referring to. And if that's the case, please take a guess. You must take a guess. Never leave a question blank on your exam. We know very little about the grading of the exams to start with. But what we do know is that when you answer a question and you get it wrong, you're not penalized. They don't take points away from you if you get an answer wrong. Apparently, you can only get points if you get a question right, which means you should always take a guess. Always take a guess. And always leave an answer. Never submit your exam without leaving some type of answer. So that's a real important part of your strategy for the exams. There is a strategy to test taking, and that's a strategy you should consider, is making sure that you know what the different ways to maximize your potential for passing this exam. And one of the ways is always have an answer for every question. Very important. So let's see how we did with this one. When starting a computer, this message is displayed, quote, the smart check has detected an imminent failure. Which of the following should be the next troubleshooting step? 36% of you said back up the storage drive. 34% of you said run a hard drive diagnostic. So we've got 10% of you, or 17% of you that said start Windows in safe mode. 10% of you said run the system file checker tool. And then 3% of you said disconnect all USB connected storage devices. Which one is it? We don't know. So let's figure out what SMART is. First, that's the error we need to know about SMART, is the self-monitoring, analysis, and reporting technology. Self-monitoring, analysis, and reporting technology, it's a technology built into our storage devices. So if your storage device is having a problem, you will get SMART errors to be able to do this. Now, when that happens, you may want to check the drive, but more importantly, your drive is telling you now that we're not just seeing a few problems with it. We have detected an imminent failure to the drive. So there is the next step that we should go through, is to back up the drive, to make sure that we have the data stored somewhere. And that's the most important part here. That is the right answer. B, back up the storage drive is the first thing you should do. That is your next step in being able to handle this particular problem. Some of you say, well, that doesn't sound like troubleshooting. It's absolutely troubleshooting. You want to know what troubleshooting is? Not having your data when the drive fails. And people asking you, why didn't you do a backup when you had a chance? That is a troubleshooting step, and it's an important troubleshooting step and one of the first things you should consider. In fact, that is a very common first troubleshooting step for making a change to a computer, upgrading a particular file on a computer. Always, always, always do the backup as your first step of the troubleshooting process. Very, very important to be able to do that. Extremely important. And as much as the chat room thinks that backing up data isn't troubleshooting, is the same reason that none of us seem to have our data when we need it. Backing up is the very most important thing you can do for troubleshooting. Always, always, especially in this scenario where the drive has now told you, I'm about to fail. There's no question you should now save as much data as possible. That is absolutely what you should be doing. That's the very next thing you should do is save that data. Incredibly important. It's not one of those situations to have that one there. I'm not even sure why that's a question. Some of you are even saying, well, I don't think that's really the case. Well, you're wrong. You cannot be more incorrect. Always save your data. In fact, I often say that companies will tell you that you, our employees, are our most important assets. Okay, that's an abject lie. That's an absolute untruth. You are not in any way their most important asset. The most important asset of any company is their data. There is no more important asset for any organization. The data is the only thing that's irreplaceable. They can replace you. You may think you can't be replaced, but they can absolutely replace you. That is the thing that is most important. Now, after that, you can run the hardware diagnostic. You can run the hard drive diagnostic. You can try to see what the problem is, but you've absolutely. Let's get some more questions in, though. I'm not going to cut you short. We got some time to go through another question. And here is the next question that we can go through. The question is, which of the following would be the best way to redirect laptop video to an external monitor? Which of these would be the best way to redirect laptop video to an external monitor? Would it be A, restart the laptop with the external monitor connected? Would it be B, connect the external monitor and close the laptop display? Would it be C, install a separate driver for the external monitor? Would it be D, power down the laptop display from the control panel? And E is toggle the video with the FN key. Those are your 5 options. Yes, that's where I was. I was back trying to get all my data backed up. I was troubleshooting. For those of you trying to figure out what that is, that's one of those to have that there. It was very short though. I was able to back up all my data very quickly, wasn't I? That's a snapshot for you. Able to do that. Have all those details. So let's run through this question again. We've got which of the following would be the best way to redirect laptop video to an external monitor? Would it be A, restart the laptop with the external monitor connected? Would it be B, connect the external monitor and close the laptop display? Would it be C, install a separate driver for the external monitor? Would it be D, power down the laptop display from the control panel? Or would it be E, toggle the video with the FN key? Now, this is an interesting question because in this one, at least 3, maybe 4 of these answers could actually redirect the laptop video to an external monitor. So there was some legitimate answers here that would work, except that wasn't the question. And this happens a lot on the exam. The question was, which of the following would be the best way to redirect laptop video to an external monitor? That's the important one. And the one that we want to deal with or work through is the way that takes the least amount of time. It's the easiest one to do. This is a pretty common problem you'll run into. You walk into a conference room, you're representing a company. This is what I used to do for a living. Walk into a room of people I've never met before. They're all around the conference room and they say, please tell us about your product. I set down my laptop. They've got a connection there for an external display. Now I need to start the meeting. What is going to be the best way to redirect my laptop video to that external monitor? This is probably the most real world question you're going to get today, for sure, at least from my perspective, for all of those. So which one would be the easiest? Let's see how you did. Which one did you choose? 73% of you said toggle the video with the function key, the FN key. Technically not a function key. It's really a secondary function key that we call the FN key to be able to work through those. That is the one that 73% of you chose, but 18% of you said you connect the external monitor and you close the laptop display. That's your easiest way to do it. 5% of you said restart the laptop with the external monitor connected. 2% of you said power down the laptop display from the control panel. And 1% of you said install a separate driver for the external monitor. Well, here's the real problem, isn't it? Is that we now have this challenge that we want to be able to access that very quickly. I mentioned walking into a room, everybody's looking at you. They're saying, start your meeting, start your presentation, and you've not even connected to the display yet. How can you quickly do this? So that is one where it becomes extremely important to be able to make that happen as quickly as possible and as easily as possible. And it's that nifty function key that allows you to do it. There's usually on your keyboard an FN key on a laptop, and then there are some differently colored keys that you can work through somewhere that might toggle through different options there. One is computer only, one is duplicate, one is extend, and one is projector only. That's the easiest, fastest, simplest way to do it. Now, some of you in the chat room going, well, that's a trick question. Well, let's step through the different options and let's see how tricky this happens to be. Since this is one that I have lived through, I can tell you there's no trick to it at all. You just have to be very good at connecting and plugging these in very, very quickly. So let's see what the different options are. We've already decided that toggling the video with the function key, which means you plug in your monitor, you hit one keystroke, and you're done. There's not much faster than that, right? You plug in one keystroke, hold down the function key, hit that one key, and you're finished. They see the screen. Suddenly it's up on there, and you start talking. Very, very fast. It takes you seconds to be able to do that. My way, that is the best way to be able to do that. So that's very simple to have that there. So let's look at these other options. So the other options, 19% of you said connect the external monitor and close the laptop display. So just close the laptop display. I'm not even sure what that would do. Will that send the video signal out? On some laptops it will, and some laptops it won't. On some laptops it turns off the laptop. Depends on how you've got it configured. That's not gonna help you very much. That will not redirect laptop to an external monitor. And on top of that, how are you going to go to the next slide? That's your biggest problem. How are you going to actually do the demonstration in your browser when you've now just closed your laptop display? So that's not going to help you either. Certainly not the best option of everything that is here. Certainly not the best option. 6% of you said restart the laptop with the external monitor connected. That usually works, by the way. That's actually a pretty good option. 6% of you that chose that were thinking, well, that works great. I've done that and it works. And in fact, you're right. You plug in the external monitor, you restart your laptop, it sees there as external monitor, and then it uses that monitor by default. A perfectly valid question. However, how long does it take to restart your laptop? It takes me a long time to restart my laptop, certainly relatively much longer than just pressing function monitor. That's pretty nice to have that there. So that is a long, involved process that takes a little bit of time. That's one where that's a little bit more of an issue to get that there. So I would choose that as an option, but it's not the best option. And the question asked the best option. So the 2% of you said power down the laptop display from the control panel. I think that would work. Maybe it would. Maybe if you powered down the laptop display, it would automatically look for another display and use that external connection. I'm not even sure if that's valid, but can you imagine the time it takes? Hold on, everybody. Let me get into the control panel. Let me find displays. Here's displays. Okay. Maybe it's not under displays. Maybe it's under The settings. Let me go to the settings. Okay. Oh, no, it's under device manager. That's where you could have just pushed a button. You'd be done. So that's not a good option either. Whether that one even works is questionable. And then finally, 1% of you said install a separate driver for the external monitor. In fact, it's kind of nice to have a driver for the external monitor so that the laptop knows how to use that monitor appropriately. In most of the time, your laptop and Windows in general will be able to connect and use that external monitor without any additional drivers loaded. So that, by the way, also installing a driver for the monitor doesn't actually redirect any video to the monitor. It just installs a driver for the monitor. So that's not the right thing either to be able to do that. So hunting down different menus, restarting your computer, trying to load or disable or click things on your screen, completely not the right answer here, because our question specifically asks which would be the best way. And whenever you see the best way with any of this, it's always the easiest way. For some reason, the chat room, I do see this, people say this a lot. No, that's the CompTIA way, or that's the Microsoft way. That's actually the way you do it. CompTIA doesn't make these things up. CompTIA is not one that makes external monitors work properly. Microsoft doesn't come up with a specific way for external monitors to work properly. The way that universally this works is that function key in your keyboard, or it may not even be the function key. You might even have a dedicated button on your keyboard to be able to do that. This is truly the easiest way. Of all 5 of these things, that's the way that's the quickest, the easiest. It takes a moment, and it's one that I used quite a bit to be able to quickly connect. If you've ever been in a meeting on the other side and watched somebody come into the room and they're stumbling around with, how do I get this on the mod? Do you know how to get this running on the external monitor? Is there a button you put? How do I make the thing? If you could just push the function key and then the monitor button, that's the one. That's the one you need. Take a second. We'd be off to the races if you could just do that. That's what this question means. That's why whenever you see the term the best way, the next thing, the most appropriate thing you should do, that's what they're talking about. The fastest, easiest, most efficient, and ultimately, especially given the list of things here, really the only most obvious answer there is. So make sure you look at all the possible answers. You kind of determine that one could be right. I could do it that way. I could do it this way. Between those options, how would I make that happen? So that's where, whenever I start trying to break out what best or what next or what most means on the exam, that's what they're talking about. So if you take nothing out of the study groups other than that, it becomes useful to have that there. So E is the right answer. Toggling the video with the FN key, absolutely what you should be doing. 18% of you said connect the external monitor, close the laptop display. Could work, might not work. Could put your computer to sleep. Certainly not the best answer, because then you can't control your computer. You've got 5% restarting the laptop, 2% powering down. Out of all 4 of those other answers, none of them are even close to being as easy as toggling the video with the FN key. And in fact, that is the easiest way to do it, regardless of what you're using there. Hopefully you're familiar with that. Work through all of those pieces. I think it's one that you should also know. It's always part of your exam objectives to know that as well. I keep talking about those exam objectives like you know what they are. Let me tell you what these things are. It is probably the best possible study material that you would ever run into for your exams. It will tell you every single thing you need to know for the exam. Every topic in detail is listed in these exam objectives. So make sure you download and use them. I've got a link from my website that will take you directly to these exam objectives. Go to professormesser.com/objectives. It will redirect you over there so that you can do that. Those objectives, by the way, extensive. Let me see if I can pull them up on my screen just so you can get a feel. I tell people this, but I feel like if you don't see them, you don't appreciate how valuable these exam objectives are. So let me bring up the latest set of exam objectives that I have, and you can see them. Here they are, the 220-1001 exam objectives. Gives you a breakdown of the details here. And just for the first one, mobile devices. Given a scenario, install and configure laptop hardware and components. Hardware/device replacement for keyboard, hard drive, SSD versus hybrid versus magnetic disk. What are those? What are the differences there? You need to know. 1.8 inch versus 2.5 inch. You have to know about memory. You have to know about a smart card reader, about the optical drive, about the wireless card and Bluetooth module, about the cellular card, the video card, the mini PCIe, the screen, the DC jack, the battery, the touchpad, the plastics, the frames, the speaker, the system board, and the CPU. That's just the first section of the first domain. That is extensive. So make sure you have a copy of these objectives. They are the best checklist you will ever run into for your exam, and have these things. They're incredibly useful to have that there. Be very familiar. If you haven't downloaded these, stop what you're doing. Stop watching this video. Go download the objectives. Come back to us. That's what you should get the very first thing before you start your exam studies, and it should be the last thing you use for your exam studies. Extremely useful to have that there. Well, we do one of these study groups every month. I do one 2 days from now. So on August the 15th, 2 days, and today's Tuesday, on Thursday, I'm going to do another one for the 220-1002, where you can come back and tell me how much of a trick question I've created for you. So that might help you to have that there. Also, 2 of these available in September, September 10th, September 12th. If you're just not sure when the latest live event is going to be, or you're watching this well after September 10th or 12th, feel free to have a look. Go out to professormester.com/calendar. And that will list out everything that is there. You'll be able to certainly be able to break that down and see when the last one of these events is going to be. That might help you too as you're going through this and trying to break down all of those pieces. That will help you. Well, thank you for being here in this first hour plus. We kind of went overtime here because I had to step away. I appreciate your flexibility there. Don't forget about following us on Twitter. There's an A+ question every day on Twitter. Go to professormesser.com/Twitter. Also, we have videos on YouTube for darn near anything. Go out to professormesser.com/YouTube for your A+, for Network Plus, Security Plus, and a little bit more that's out there as well. Don't forget about the course notes. They go back to help keep everything running here at professormesser.com/1000notes. And again, the calendar can get you more things there. Well, you want more questions? We have another hour's worth of questions, except this time you're asking me. I'm not asking you. So I'm going to open up the phone lines in the second hour. We're going to have you come through, and then you can ask me about any of these things. You can call me and ask me what I was thinking when I said that making a backup was troubleshooting, I guess. Although I'm not sure how I would respond to that. Maybe you're right. Maybe we should never back up again. Maybe that's what we should do. Of course, I will take these questions from the chat room as well. So for those of you that don't want to call, you don't want to call in with a phone and do those types of things, you can just put your question in the chat room. We can go through that as well and break out all of those pieces. Thank you for being here. We would not be able to do this without your support. Thanks for sticking in here. Thanks for answering the questions. Stick around for the next hour. I want to thank you for being here. We'll see you next time on the A+ Study Group. I think I can get the phone lines running now. Let's see if I can. Here we go. Nope. Do this, do that, the other. Here we go. So bear with me a moment. I'm going to get the phone lines up and running for the people that would like to call in on the voice lines. You certainly don't have to, but you can. Let's get this up and running. One moment. Go to my shows. My call-in, when I host these shows, the call-in is actually done on the cloud. So that's one of those things that does come in handy for me as well. And then I am going to call into my own show. How you like that? Bear with me a moment. There's nobody here but me. So this takes me a second to get everything set up, and then I'll tell you exactly how you can call in to this as well. Let's type in some numbers here.
Enter your 6-digit PIN.
All right.
Welcome.
There we go. So I know that everything works on here. So it's nice to have that working for those pieces. So that means that the phone lines are up and running. We'll take questions from the chat room. You're welcome to put some questions in there and talk about those. You could also call in anywhere in the continental United States. It's a toll-free number. you can call in with 855-785-RJ45. That number again, 855-785-7545. You can also call with Skype from anywhere in the world for free. No Skype minutes are required by putting a +1 at the beginning. So +1 855-785-7545. So that's one of the other things you can do. And I'll take questions directly from the chat room as well. So we've got things to do for that. What is the timetable? A lot of people asking about the 220-1001 quiz on my site. And quite honestly, the time frame is really based on whenever I can get those things up there. I think we've got a good section of questions, a good selection of questions available for that. So for those of you that are wondering about this, let me show it on my screen so that you can see what I'm talking about. On my website are the 220, I've got my head up there in two places, don't I? Are the 220-901 and 902, those need to come down. And then I need to put the 1001, 1002 pop quizzes up. Got to work on that. Got to get that going. First, let me get rid of the two heads on the screen because we can only barely stand the one as it is. So that's one that I just have to do. There are questions that are the replays. They're the archives of the study groups. So that's where those questions are coming from, and I just haven't put them up there. We didn't have any to start with because we didn't have many study groups done. But now that we do have study groups done, we can add some of those questions up there so that you can just run through them and get familiar with that, have those pieces there. So that may be a good way to do it, to have that there. Let's go to the phone lines. I think we got some calls that are lined up. Let me make sure that I have got all of this turned on properly. Make sure that we can get to all of these and have the pieces. Let's go to Illinois, to the 224 area code. Hello, caller. Thanks for calling. What's your question? First, what's your name? Where are you calling from? And then we'll get to your question.
Yeah, my name is Ishmael. I'm calling from Chicago area.
Hey, Ishmael, thanks for calling.
And thank you. So last year, I actually studied for my 901, and I did a pretty good job. I took the test. I passed it. I did a pretty good job. Now, the problem is that I never took my 902 in time.
Oh.
So now I'm going to have to take, I kind of messed up there. So now I'm going to have to take the test all over again.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, I'm just wondering, because I did use your all of your videos to study, and they were definitely one of the major parts of the reason that I passed. And I'm just wondering, do you recommend that I go through all of the new videos one by one, or is there kind of like an easier route to where I could, find some, study material that just covers the new sections of the test? Because I remember most of it. It's just that, I need to learn all the new stuff that's been added to it.
That is a tough one because for the most part, CompTIA didn't simply remove chunks of the exam and pull in entirely new chunks of the exam. They really did a combination of that. They kind of embedded the changes into the existing exam objectives. For those of you that are watching, let me give you an idea of what I'm talking about. This is the exam objectives on the screen for the 220-1001. And you can see mobile devices are at the top. Section 2.2 is given a scenario, install components. Section 1.3 is given a scenario, install appropriate laptop features. Everywhere you see green on the screen are topics that are identical to the topics on the 901 exam. So anytime you see yellow, those are topics that are new. So you can see they're peppered in with everything else. For example, in section 1.5, you have to know about micro USB, mini USB, and then they just added on USB-C. Well, USB-C wasn't in 901, but it's in the 1001. But they just sort of slipped it in there. Everything else in that section is all green. So it's all the same thing. In fact, the vast majority of what you'll go through in this, 80% of the 1001 was covered on the 901. So it's a pretty big number. But you got to find those little pieces. It's a little different. I'll go to the next page. You'll see what I mean. You got to find the pieces that are very different. For example, in section 2.3, given a scenario, install and configure a basic wired/wireless SOHO network, a huge chunk of that one is new. Some of it is old, but a lot of it's new. So you're going to see a mix of those. The purple, by the way, is a reference to me, which is it's not necessarily new, but it needs to be expanded on from the 901 exam. So people were talking about, for instance, cloud computing. So huge sections, like section 4.2, brand new on this exam. Nothing existed on the 901 that was like that. So I can't tell you that there's just one thing or one set of things that you should study as a delta. It's really a combination of all of these things together that's the delta. That's what I would recommend you do, is go through the exam objectives so that you can become familiar with what are these differences. And you may be in a situation where you can simply read through what the differences are and just study those individual topics and take your 1001 exam and pass it. Or you may be more comfortable going through the videos. If you go through my 1001 videos, you'll think, well, this is very similar to what I just learned on the 901. It is, because it's almost identical. There's just that peppering of new things. And there's also a peppering of things that were removed that I didn't show in that list. So that's the real challenge, is figuring out which one of those things is different and study those topics. But I think you'll be very familiar with those. You shouldn't have, you passed your 901, the 1001 is not going to be much of a problem for you at all.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I think I'm going to do that then. I mean, if anything, I could just take a little bit of time and just kind of go through the videos again. And I mean, it wouldn't hurt, since it's been nearly a year now since I've taken it. So
might be
maybe
I'll
just do that.
Sure.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm probably going to order your exam guide, the physical copy. So
the course notes will help you too, because they'll certainly point out everything that's in the exam objectives.
Definitely. Okay, well, thank you so much. You answered all my questions. I appreciate it. And thank you for everything you do. You definitely helped me tremendously last time. So I recommend all of your material for everybody listening.
Thanks, Ishmael. I think you're going to be just fine on the 1001 and 1002. Best of luck.
All right. Thank you. Bye.
That's the real challenge you run into with these different exam versions. It's not just these things have changed and you're done. It's just these little peppering, the peppering of different things in there that's the difference. And for those of you in the chat room going, well, you have to know Mac now. We had to know Mac for the 901. In fact, the Mac OS, if I go to the 1001 exam objectives, since you brought it up, there's some calls on the line. Folks, just hold on there. I'm going to get to you in just a moment. Let's look at the objectives that were changed on the 1002. Let's see if I have that list. Okay, let me bring up my 1002 list for you. You're going to love this. For Mac OS. Here it is. Okay. So for those of you wanting to see what's new with Mac OS on the 1002, here we go. There's the section 1.9. Given a scenario, use features and tools of the Mac OS and Linux client desktop operating systems. Everything's the same except the last command line option, kill. Kill is the only new thing you have to know for Mac OS and Linux. Everything else exactly the same. Microsoft Windows networking, exactly the same. No difference there at all. Logical security concepts, half of it's new. Wireless security protocols, half of it's new. So it's a mix of these things. You never know exactly what's going to be new and what's going to be different on there. That's the real challenge, is making sure you know exactly what those things are to have them in there. I think whenever I start looking through there, it's nice to be able to figure those things out too. Whenever I break those out and work through those. So I think it's a good thing to know. So let's very useful to have that there. Let's go back to the phones, to the 757. There you are, caller. Thanks for calling. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Yes. Hi, Professor Messer. My name is Crystal. I'm calling from Virginia.
Thank you for calling. What's your question?
Yes. Well, I wanted to say I thank you so much. Me and my brother, I actually just graduated in May with the associate's degree in cyber network security, and I've been watching your videos, and I'm going to take the 1001 and 1002, but I know from watching your videos that they have changed. My question is, I didn't want to hold up the line, is what are some of the first steps you think a person that's starting out like me, because I have a help desk position coming up in September
Nice.
that I'm supposed to start, and they want you to have your A+ certification within 3 to 6 months. And I took the 901, but I failed it the first time because I didn't answer all the questions and I forgot. So I just wanted to know, what are some like pointers that you can think of maybe for someone that's starting out in a help desk position? Because I'm not like 100% confident going in.
Your time frame of 3 to 6 months is spot on, by the way. I would say the average of people coming to my site and taking the 1001 and the 1002 are spending on average about 3 months for each one of those exams. So a 6-month time frame to get both of those exams done is right in the right time frame. So you shouldn't have a problem with that time frame. You've given yourself plenty of time. You're not going to be tight on time. I've had people come to my site and say, my employer wants me to have this certification in a week. And I have to tell people that's if you have no knowledge of any of this information, you've not been working in the industry, you're not familiar with hardware, you never really worked with these operating systems before, that's a relatively short time. It's a very aggressive time frame, to say the least. That's almost an irresponsible request to make of an employee to have that amount of things done in a single week of time. 6 months is great. So the first thing, and I've mentioned it earlier, for anyone taking these exams is get the exam objectives. They should be your checklist. They should be the source you go to for everything you do on the exam. You should cross-reference them against the books that you get. You should cross-reference them against the videos that you watch. They will tell you exactly what you need to know, and they will help you if you start getting into some of these other things that you'll read in other books. You'll start to see topics that you're wondering, where did that come from? And you'll find the topics not in the exam objectives. If it's not in the exam objectives, ignore it. Focus on the exam objectives. If you know everything that's in the exam objectives, you're going to have no problem when you sit down for your exam. The other thing is I'll give you my rule of 4 for the exam. These are the 4 things that you must have to maximize your potential for passing these exams. The first one is a good book. Doesn't matter which book it is, doesn't matter where you get it, as long as it is a 221,001 or 221,002 book, you've got a book that you can read. In some cases, some people like to have more than one book. That's up to you and how you study, but at least get a book. A book will teach you things in a way that is different than watching a video or doing hands-on. So I'm going to give you these 4 different resources, and all 4 of them are important that you have. So the book is one of them. The other one is the video series, whether it's my video series or anybody's. Video teaches you in a way that is different than learning from a book and different than learning from hands-on. The hands-on piece is an important one too. So there's your third one, is to get hands-on. So in the probably more important for the 1002 because there's a lot of command lines that you do. There's a lot of commands you have to run on the operating system. There's different utilities you need to know about in the operating system. So use those utilities. Run those things from the command line. Get accustomed to running those. There's something about typing them into the keyboard and seeing the response on the screen that fires the synapses in your brain in a different way than watching someone do it. You physically doing it does make a difference. So get hands-on. And the last one is Q&A. Get some sample tests. There are books of sample tests. There are some sample tests on the internet, although the quality varies widely on the internet to what you would find. But find some good Q&A that can help test what you know, and you'll get a feel of different topics that you may want to spend time on. Those are the 4 things you should have. And if I had to pick the 4 things to maximize your grade at the end of the exam, those are the 4 things I would recommend.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
I really appreciate it.
Best of luck. You're in a great position. You got a help
amazing.
desk. There's a whole bunch of people that you'll be working with every day, and a lot of the topics you use in your job will suddenly start blending together with the exam. I think it's a good place to be if you're trying to pass your A+ exam.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm definitely going to purchase your notes and study guides. I've been looking at your videos too. So I thank you. I think you're an amazing person, and you're helping so many people, as the caller before said.
I appreciate it. Best of luck, Crystal.
Thank you so much, sir.
And by the way, I'm doing the easy part. So you're the one that actually has to do the study. You're the one that actually has to do the take the exam. You have to go in the exam room. You have to pass these exams. I feel like I got the easy part of this gig. So more than happy to help with some of those things for those. We'll go back to the calls in just a moment. The chat room, some questions. So people say, SODIMMs, we use SODIMMs a lot for laptops. Those are the smaller sized DIMMs. But why don't we use the SODIMMs on an ATEX motherboard? Why is that? Aren't things supposed to get smaller? Now, the memory modules we use, the regular size DIMMs on a motherboard, are actually pretty small compared to what we used to use. The SODIMMs are even smaller. And the real answer there is not that we don't use it because it's the wrong technology. We don't use them on our ATEX motherboards because when you make things smaller, it makes them more expensive. That is basically the reason. There is some advantage to also having a larger memory module because you can move data in and out of that module a little bit faster because the pins are farther away from each other, and there's a physics issue with interference and being able to do all of that quickly. Having a larger module actually helps improve the speed. You can go a little bit faster because of that. But the real reason, forget the speed and efficiency, they're cheaper when they're bigger. That's why. And if you're trying to micro-size things, get them into a smaller form factor, it costs more money. So that's probably the biggest reason for most people. But there's a performance issue there as well. That does come in handy. So that's one where I think if I'm trying to get the right pins for or the right memory, the motherboard manufacturers have a pretty good grasp on this. And if they thought they would be able to go faster with smaller memory modules, they would have already moved there. But if you look at some of these high-powered, high-end gaming motherboards, that's where you'll start to see where the engineering makes things faster. And that's why they're using these full-size memory modules. They can fit a lot more higher density modules into a smaller place, and they're very fast modules as well. That's the way to do it in my mind. Let's go back to the phones. The 484 area code. Hi, caller. Thanks for calling. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hi, Professor. This is Ben, and I'm calling from Louisville, Kentucky.
Hey, Ben, could you pick up the phone? It would help everyone who's listening.
Professor?
Yes.
Yeah, hi. Sorry, I was kind of farther from my microphone. I'm calling from Louisville, Kentucky.
Do you have a phone you can pick up or a microphone you can talk directly into? If not, you can keep going. We can hear you.
Yeah, okay. I'm sorry about that. My MacBook is a little quiet.
No worries. No worries. What can we do for you?
All right. Well, what I want to know is the fact that my college is offering computer courses at the Southwest campus, and I am pretty sure it's A+ that they're offering, that sort of thing. And I'm feeling a little nervous on it because I haven't really, I've watched some of your videos, I've seen things like that, and I'm kind of nervous about the course because I took the A+ cert thing class in my high school days in 2010 for my senior year, and I didn't really read the book back then. I just sort of wasn't really familiar with computers as much as I am now, as I've said before. And I'm getting a little more nervous as the days for my college trial of it come near and that sort of thing. And I start class in a couple weeks, and I don't know what to do to best prepare myself for this class, and I'm running out of time to prepare. So I'm like, okay, what am I supposed to do? And I felt I asked your advice on that.
Well, I think we can go back to what I was talking to Crystal about. Those 4 things are really going to be the bedrock of anybody's studying. And sometimes people don't use all 4 of these. Sometimes they use a subset. I think if you're going to maximize what you're going to be doing, you do need to use all 4. And unlike the class you took before, you're going to have to read the book. There's just no way around it. There's at some point I have to sit down and read these darn books. Some books are better than others, and if you are reading through a book from a class, one of the things I might recommend is if the book you have in the classroom doesn't quite match your style, there's a lot of different A+ books out there, and even the digital ones especially are very reasonably priced. So don't restrict yourself by using a book that doesn't work for you. Get one that does work for you. Get a good book, watch the videos, get plenty of Q&A, and get that hands-on. Probably of those 4 things, the hands-on really brings it home. So as you're going through this class and they're talking about installing Windows, or they're talking about using Device Manager, it sure helps if you go into Device Manager and play around with it as well. And for that reason, for those of you that haven't heard me talk about this before, I'll talk about this now, is a website called modern.ie, MODERN, like the modern world. Modern.ie redirects you to one of Microsoft's developer sites. This is the modern.ie website. It's designed to give developers a way to run their browser-based applications in Windows in a lab-type environment. And under the Tools pull-down menu is an option for virtual machines where you can download Windows 7, Windows 8.1, and Windows 10. Those are the 3 operating systems you need to know for your A+ certification exam for the 1002 exam. So you can download VMs directly from that website and run them on your computer. So you don't have to have licenses. You don't have to deal with installing code. All you have to have is a virtual machine, a piece of software. So if you're running VirtualBox, or you're running one of the VMware virtualization platforms, it gives you a list of the options available there. You can simply download Windows and use it. So when I say get hands-on, that's a great way to get hands-on without spending any money, and you got a full-blown Windows to be able to work through it. That's another great thing you can use.
That's cool. Well, actually, on that point, I actually do have MSDN access from my school.
Great.
So what I might have is I might download what you're talking about from Modern IE and use that with the VMware that I get from my class. So,
There is a section of the exam objectives that talk about installing Windows, and installing Windows is pretty simple. That's a pretty.
Yeah, I've done it many of times, and I know how to do that. But the command line stuff that they go over is where I get a little stumped.
Spend some time at the command line, run through some things. If you're in a VM, you're not going to break anything, so there's no worries. You can play around
and you can take a snapshot if needed.
Yep, exactly. That's a great way to do it, and I think that drives those topics home. And that way, if you have a question of the exam that talks about these topics in Linux or topics in Windows, and they pop you at a command prompt, you'll know exactly what to do.
Yes, exactly. And I did buy the 901, 902 books, but I do still have to talk to my folks about getting a 1001 and 1002 book, which I do plan to do for sure at some point. So yeah, I think you answered my question. I just need to crackle down and get on these things, which I do plan to do sometime this afternoon.
You get through the book. I think once you get into it and start doing and mixing up between all 4 of those things, you're going to do fine.
All right. Well, thank you.
Thanks, Ben. That's always a challenge is motivation. That's my biggest challenge is motivation. And I always start a project and look back 6 months later saying, I started that project. Shouldn't we have finished the project? And I think that's just a problem everyone has with life. So don't be dismayed if you get into this. It's a problem. You can always go back to the questions. Reddit is a great source. There's a CompTIA subreddit where there's a lot of people talking back and forth all the time. We've got chat rooms on my website. We've got these study groups where you can call in and ask questions. All of those things are there. Take advantage of it, being able to do that. Are my course notes an alternative to the big 1001 book to read? My course notes are exactly what they sound like. They are notes taken from my course. And just as you would not read the Cliff Notes to have the full experience of reading the actual novel, I would definitely not recommend you read my course notes to represent all of the knowledge that's in a full-size 1001 textbook. Definitely not. They are notes, as if you were taking notes from my videos. They are an alternative to you taking notes yourself. That's probably the best way I can explain it. And if you take your own notes, you won't need my notes. You can use the ones that you took. So it's completely up to you and how you like to work. Find the way that works for you, and I think you'll be fine with that. Let's go to 443 in Baltimore. Hello, caller. Thanks for holding. What can we do for? Thanks for holding for so long. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hi, my name is Erin, and I'm actually calling from Charlotte, North Carolina.
Oh, hello, Erin. Thank you. I don't know why my phone is telling me Baltimore, but I'll take Charlotte, North Carolina. What can we do for you?
Okay, so we have a question. I am actually in class at the moment, and we want to know what is the difference between a radius and TACX?
Oh, this is a common question that you'll run into, especially if you start getting into more networking. Certainly on the security side, you get into situations where you need to centralize authentication. I see this used a lot for environments where you need people to connect to a device or connect to a network service, and you need them to use credentials that they already have registered to them. If you go to work for a big company, you'll probably have a Windows login that you use. They'll probably be using Active Directory, and they have everybody's username and password in this Active Directory database. Well, then you go home with your laptop, and you would like to connect back to work, and you want to connect using the Works VPN. So you load up the VPN software, you click connect, and it prompts you for a username and password. Now, ideally, you would like to be able to use the username and password that matches the Windows username and password that you always use at work. Think of how all the different resources you have to connect to during the day. It would be horrible if you have to use a different username and password for Windows, a different username and password for your VPN, a different username and password for the HR configuration to do your benefits, a different username and password to be able to submit expense reports. It would just be a mess. Nobody would be able to do this. So we centralize these username and passwords. And the way we do that is inside of your VPN software configuration of the server. You say, I would like you to use this centralized database to be able to check somebody's username and password. And very common protocols are used to do this. For example, if you're comparing or you're trying to authenticate against a Microsoft Active Directory database, the protocol that the VPN controller would use to talk back to your Active Directory is LDAP. I know you didn't ask about LDAP, but that's another one that comes up quite a bit that's very common. So it would talk to Active Directory through LDAP. But you may not be using Active Directory. Your environment may be a Linux environment. It might be a Mac OS environment, and your Mac OS environment may not use LDAP to be able to have people access that database. It may be using a different protocol such as Radius, or it might be using TACX or TACX Plus. Radius is a very, very common protocol to use. That's if it's not doing LDAP, it's probably doing Radius. And that's one of the most common ones you'll see, probably because it is so open and it is one that's been around for so long. If you use a lot of Cisco or Cisco-centric equipment, like you're logging into a switch or a Cisco switch or a Cisco router, and you would like to authenticate with a central database, there is usually a TACX server that is able to store usernames and passwords, and that might be the centralized database. The decision on whether you use LDAP or Radius or TACX is really going to depend on the environment that you happen to have in your data center, on the software that you're using that needs to be able to do the authentication. Some devices don't talk TACX, they only talk Radius. Some devices don't talk Radius or TACX, they only talk LDAP. So it's almost a scenario type situation where you're installing this VPN concentrator. How is everybody going to authenticate? Let's see what the VPN authenticator can do. Maybe it only does TACX, so that answers it for you. That you'll just have to make that decision based on the capabilities. And many devices these days talk multiple types of protocols, so it allows you to decide which one is best for your particular environment.
Okay, so these are pretty much server-based rather than network-based, is what you're saying.
It is all of them are protocols, so they're going across the network, but it's a standard way of communicating back to a centralized database of usernames and passwords. So it's a way that these third-party devices can somehow integrate into an existing database that you might have in your environment.
Okay, thank you. And I have one more question.
Sure.
My class would like for you to give them a shout-out on your show. We are in the Creating IT Futures CompTIA Bootcamp for A+, and we have to take the test in 2 weeks.
So how long have you been studying for this?
Actually been doing it's an 8-week program, and we're 6 weeks in.
Wow. So that's a pretty aggressive time frame to be able to do that. What is the name of it again?
It's Creating IT Futures.
This is great. So is this one whenever you anybody who's in Charlotte, North Carolina, make sure you check out Creating IT Futures. Get your IT certification. Get that A+ certification. Find a way to get certified. Stop into Charlotte. See if you can get into their next class. 8 weeks, you'll be certified. It's a great way to do it. Thank you for calling, Erin.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, everybody. I need to get back to Charlotte. I haven't been there in a while. That is a great city to be in as well. I could use that barbecue right now. I'm thinking about it. Let's go to 414. Hello, caller. Thank you for holding for so long. What's your name? Where are you calling from? From Milwaukee.
Eric,
are you there?
Calling. Yep. This is Eric. I'm calling from Milwaukee.
Hey, Eric. Thanks for calling. What can we do for you?
I have a couple of interns that have been studying for the 901 and 902. Sadly, they failed on the 902, but they only failed by a couple of questions. So they've done basically all of the advice that you've given out, right? Your notes, everything that you have, they've used. Do you have any thoughts about how to push, at least on the 1002 side, just a couple of things that they could do to become better in that testing area?
Well, I'll say two things first, or one thing first. For most of us, I mentioned earlier, and I should have mentioned this before, this might be a good way out for folks that have taken the 901 or they've taken the 902 and they weren't able to take that last test before the English language exams were retired on July 31st. Non-English language exams don't retire until October 31st. So if any of your interns speak Spanish or some other language, they can take a Spanish language version of the 902, pass it, and you'll have both an English 901, a Spanish 902, and you have your A+ certification. So there may be opportunities for people who are either bilingual or would like to learn Spanish very quickly and be able to still take the 900 series exams. Back to your question, Eric, which was how do we now get these folks running with the 1000 series? There's a little bit of a reset, but not much of one. As I mentioned earlier, 20% of the 1000 series exam is new objectives. There's 20% of those objectives are brand new. So there's going to be some kind of a little bit of a reset. You're going to have to go back now. And as I mentioned, there's not any one thing or series of things that you would be able to learn. It's kind of a peppering of different topics depending on the section of the exam objectives. One thing that I really should do at this point is make some of these, my list of objectives available so that people can see which things are new and which things are different. That might be useful to at least give people something they can concentrate on. So if they can, if they're familiar with the 901 and they passed it, maybe you can just show those topics. They can learn just those topics, and then they'd be able to take their 1001. That may be one way to do it. Otherwise, you're kind of starting over. You're kind of starting over at the beginning of the 1001 book and the 1002 book and kind of going through the process again. Unfortunately, that whole process is a challenging one. There's a time issue. There's not a lot available in the market for the new exams, but the old exams are retiring. It's a challenge for everybody. This may be a case where you just start over and now they're going to do better on their 1001 exam and ultimately they'll pass their 1002.
Okay. So, they were getting 90%, we downloaded some practice tests, where they were getting 90, 95%.
Pretty good. Yeah.
Even closing in on 98. And the thing that was kind of frustrating me is they would go and they would get 80%, or 78% or just right below the mark. Do you think that so it's probably just maybe just have them reread a book or because they were going over the exam objectives, and they pretty much knew everything on there. So I'm not sure if there was some sort of practical thing that I was missing to kind of push them over the edge, but
there's a little bit of that. For example, the questions that I see online, the vast majority of questions I see online are not questions that are in a similar style to the exam. They're very different than what the exam has. And a lot of people will go into the exam and say, boy, those questions had a different flavor. They had a different voice. They were written differently than what I was expecting. And I think that's a very common thing that people see if they focus on the questions that you find online and other places. It's hard to find a good set of practice questions out on the internet to be able to do that. It's more of a situation where you want to run through as many different questions on the internet as possible. And perhaps more importantly, if you get a question wrong, really do the research to find out, why did I get that question wrong, rather than saying, oh, it should have been A. I'll remember that the next time I come through. Unless you really drill down, especially the wrong ones. I think you really learn the most when you filter out and look at, why did I get a question wrong, rather than looking at, why did I get the questions right. That may be another good strategy to go with.
I haven't taken the test in a while, but I do, like, maybe you would know, do they actually give like a breakdown of the exam objectives? Like of what percentiles they got wrong in, like the hardware or the software now? Or
they do. They actually do it by the subdomain level. So after you take the exam, every question you got wrong, they will list out not the question itself, but they'll say, you missed a question in section 2.1, explain logical security concepts. And you missed 2 questions in section 1.7, summarize application installation and configuration concepts. So that's why I tell people, before you leave, make sure they print that out. I think that Pearson VUE, and I haven't confirmed this, maybe somebody in the chat room who has taken their exams lately, I saw that Pearson VUE has been trying to migrate over to make those exam papers, the paper you get when you finish the exam, to make them available online. There was a little talk of that recently. And if anybody is logged into their Pearson VUE account and you're able to see that, I would love to get some feedback about those things. Otherwise, I tell people, make sure you have that piece of paper when you leave, not only if you pass, but perhaps more importantly, if you don't pass, so that you know what to study up for next time.
Awesome. Well, I do want to say I do appreciate all of your work.
Thanks, Eric. I appreciate you calling.
Yep. All right. Bye.
I think that's probably the biggest challenge I have, is that a lot of places you go to take the exam, their printers aren't working. Ironically, you're taking your A+ exam, which tells you that how to fix these printers that never seem to work. And then you go to the test center and their printers don't work, except the content that's there is so important. And that's why I would love to be able to see if Pearson VUE has finally shifted over to make those reports available on their website for test takers. I heard notice of this. People were mentioning it. I should probably put a question in to the subreddit and see for myself. Let's go to 571. Hello, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Yep. My name is Laith. I'm actually calling from the Northern Virginia area.
Welcome.
Falls Church.
Great. What can we do for you?
Yes. So I actually I had a question about Ethernet cables and daisy chaining them. Now, does that ever work from like a home router or anything like that? Should that ever be recommended, or that's not something that's a great idea to actually do?
Now, when you mention Ethernet and daisy chaining, what specifically do you mean, or what are you trying to do?
So recently I crimped I put a wire, and I put the not the RJ45, but I think there's something else that you can put, the one that plugs into the outlet with a faceplate. Now, the other side of my room, I have through the wall, I put a wire, and I put it to the other side, and I connected the one we usually do towards, or you plug it in through the faceplate into a wall, and I daisy chained one wire from the router to that, and then I put another wire and I connected it to the computer. Now, is that ever recommended? Is that a bad thing, or does that really do much?
Well, the thing you always run into with Ethernet is that, especially in the ones that we use today with our switches, is that you can plug in two devices, one on one end of the wire and one end on the other. And there are people that will effectively couple those together. In fact, you can get Ethernet couplers so that you can extend the length of a wire, sort of plugging two RJ45s into each other and extending that. It sounds a lot like what you were doing when you were simply plugging the same cables in, the same pins in, and extending the length of that. What you would not be able to do is plug a device into one end of that wire, plug in a device in the other end of the wire, and then somehow fit a third one there in the middle. That part would not work with Ethernet. You'd find tremendous problems with the Ethernet signal when you tried to do that. But you could simply extend those through. There are people that do that using punch downs, using interfaces, just to be able to extend the length of Ethernet from one side to the other. But you would still only be able to use two devices on that run.
Yeah, and that's what I did. I used the punch down cable, punch down tool to punch down into a little, a mini, I guess you can say, patch itself. So that's what I use. So,
and that works perfectly fine. There's probably a lot more loss when you're having that type of connector in the middle. And there's loss also when you plug in a coupler. But if you're not going 100 meters down the road, you're just trying to connect further in the same building or even the same house, usually you're not going to have a problem with signal loss. It'll still be able to get plenty of signal there. And if you're punching it down, you got a nice solid connection there. They're right next to each other. You're using equipment that is designed for Ethernet. I've seen some scenarios where it's someone who's very accustomed to using telephone lines. They simply cut the cable, they untwist them, and they stick a cable connector on the end of all four of those pair, thinking that that would provide the type of connection they need, and it really doesn't. They need a lot more of a solid connection, the kind that you would get from a punch down. So you should be fine with that.
Okay, perfect. Thanks so much. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for calling. That's whenever you start working with Ethernet cable too, there's, of course you would love a direct run. That's what everybody wants with their Ethernet cable. Sometimes you have to see if you can find a way around that. And you'd be surprised how resilient Ethernet can be. Even if you can't run it at gigabit speeds with that configuration, maybe you drop it down to 100 megabit and you get a much better response. Sometimes you just need a 10 megabit connection. And you can run a lot farther over a much worse cable. All you have to do is Google people who have run Ethernet over barbed wire, which we say sort of humorously, turns out you can do that if you happen to know what you're doing. You do run into that. Let's go to the 636. Hello, caller. Thanks for calling. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hi, this is Les from St. Louis, Missouri. Can you hear me all right?
Hey, Les, you sound great. What can we do for you?
Hey, so I was wondering, should you, or is it wise to take the 1001 and the 2002 tests right after one after the other, or?
I hear a lot of people sometimes, I see this all the time, people say, I'm walking in tomorrow to take my 1001 and 1002 exams. They do them both on the same day. And I don't know how they're able to do that. Although if you're somebody who's been in the industry a long time, you're already familiar with hardware, you're already familiar with operating systems, you might even have already taken the A+ exams back before you had to renew them, and you're just trying to get the latest version. Those people I could see walking in a single day, taking both exams and doing just fine. But from a strategy, we talked earlier about test-taking strategies. I never recommend that people do that or even study both of them at the same time. The exam objectives for the 1001 and the exam objectives for the 1002 are very different from each other. There's very little overlap. Each exam is a self-contained unit for the most part, and CompTIA has designed them to be that way so that you can study for the 1001. You can go through all the 1001 exam objectives. You can study from a 1001 book. You can go to the 1001 Q&A and study and go and take the 1001 test and pass it. Then you can forget about that. You can then completely focus on the 1002 and do all of 1002 topics and take that exam separately. It's not uncommon for people to take their exams 3 months apart, 6 months apart. You could theoretically take the one exam on the first day it's offered and then take the other exam 3.5 years later on the last day it's offered, and you would be A+ certified. And I don't think anybody's done quite that extreme, but you've got plenty of time between them. There's no reason to rush them. There's really no benefit to try to cram all that content in. That I highly recommend for most people. Just focus on one at a time and you'd be fine.
Gotcha. Okay, yeah. I'm new to getting or trying to get a job in the IT field. However, I've been building some of my own systems for the last couple of years, so I know, I would say, a little bit more than the average person.
Nice, right.
Wearing the software and whatnot.
I think that's a great way to do it. If anybody's ever built their own computer before, you start to get the nuances of, why am I using that speed of memory? Why am I choosing that particular CPU? Do I need a different heat sink with a fan? And what kind should I get? Those are the things you start to go through when you start to build your computer. I always go to PC Part Picker, which is one of my favorite sites when I'm building my computer. For those of you, you're probably familiar with it, but other people listening, here's my PC Part Picker. That's a great site to go to be able to build those things out. I think that makes total sense to me for someone who's trying to learn more about PCs, is to do the PC Part Picker. It just makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and I took it one step further, and I discovered the world of water cooling. And
yeah.
My first build was a soft line, and then I went into hard line not too long after that, and it was a really fun process.
These are things that really teach you what you need to know for the exams, and I recommend that people really do those. I love PC Part Picker. For those people that are in the chat room too, is like, yes, PC Part Picker, because when you put together a motherboard, a CPU, and memory, that's a very tight relationship, and it has to be perfect. You have to get exactly the right memory for exactly the right CPU and exactly the right motherboard, and marry those things together. And PC Part Picker's site makes sure that you don't make a mistake along those lines. Plus, I love the conversations on there where people will say, I like this particular heatsink because of this reason, and that heatsink for another, and you can kind of go that direction too. So I love the conversations that go back and forth on that site.
Gotcha. Okay. And one last quick question. Do you have to, or is it recommended to take the 901 exam before you take like the 1001 exam, or are they completely different?
They're completely different. 901 was the old, and if you're English speaking, the 901, 902 exams were retired on July 31st, so you can't take them anymore. You're out of luck. You have to take the 1000 series.
That's fine. Okay, cool. Yeah, and just wanted to say your videos have been a great help.
Fantastic.
I've been watching them for the last couple months.
Great.
So
Glad to hear it. Best of luck, Les. Thanks for the call.
All right, thanks. See ya.
That's always useful. If you can build your own computer, that's just solid. I have a lot of fun doing it too. You have to be very careful that you don't break something. When you break something building your own computer, that can sometimes be expensive. You don't want to do that. It helps if somebody's already done it before, he can walk through it. Let's go up to Canada. Hello, Toronto. Which name are you calling from?
Yeah, hi. My name is Sherry. I'm calling from Toronto. I thought that the toll-free will not work from Canada, but however it worked. Thank you so much for helping us. And I have a question. I gave a 902 exam 3 or 4 years ago, 902, but at that time I didn't get time to give 901. Now the new CompTIA exam has come.
Right.
Do I have to give 902? Do I have to give 901, or do I have to give I have to go all over again?
If you only were able to pass. Sorry, go ahead.
And I have one more question. That I saw lots of your video in YouTube, which is very helpful. And now I'm kind of confused which video I have to watch, because there are lots of video now. Which one to watch, to give, to prepare for the new exam. So can you please help on that?
Absolutely. So the first question is the one that a lot of people have run into, which is they have studied or they passed a 901 exam or they passed their 902 exam and they were not able to pass the other exam before July 31st. And unfortunately, that wipes the slate clean. And now you have to start all the way back at the beginning again, and you have to pass both the 1001 and the 1002 to be able to now earn your A+ certification. If you passed only one of the 900 series, then your time has run out and you now have to start over with the 1000 series exams, unfortunately. What I tell people as far as keeping track of what to watch, on my website on ProfessorMesser.com, I have an index of every single video in the order that matches the exam objectives. There's also a YouTube playlist of exactly the same thing. I have a playlist for the 1001. I have a playlist for the 1002. That's in the exact same order. So you can go through both of those and you can watch them in that order. Or if you're reading a book, because most books don't follow the same order as the exam objectives, but most books will tell you at the beginning of the chapter, in this chapter, we go through section 3.4. And you can read the book and then watch all of my videos in section 3.4, and you can match things up, cross-tabulate things in that way as well. So that's one of the things that's another good way to do it. Either way works. I try to put my videos and number them to match the exam objectives so that you can use any other resources and cross-tabulate back to those numbers regardless of what you're watching.
Okay, thank you so much. And I have a second question about the about the exam. As you said that I can keep the gap, I can give 1001 and later 1002. So meanwhile, if I give 1001, I get pass. After that, I get job, right? So if my employer asks, do you have an A+ certification? So what do I have to tell them? Because I have not given a complete exam.
Yeah,
so,
you've got to pass both the 1001 and the 1002 to really say that you're A+ certified. So until you get to that point, you can only say that you're halfway there or you're working towards that final cert, but you can't really say you're A+ certified until you get both of those exams passed.
Okay, thank you. And the last question is, where I can get the, discount voucher for the test?
There are some discount vouchers out there. I used to be able to offer some on my site. I was working through and with my friends at GTS Learning. GTS Learning was bought by CompTIA at the beginning of last year, so it's been about a year and a half. At that point, they stopped offering those discounts. But if you look around the internet, in many books that you find, the books themselves have discount codes in them. A lot of what you will find is codes that are about 10% off. However, if you are in the United States, I realize you're not, but for the other people that are watching, if you're in the United States and you are in a university, you can get a substantially discounted. You would look for the CompTIA Academic Marketplace, and they would be able to provide discounts there as well. Otherwise, there's a number of 10% discounts you can probably find on the internet.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Sherry.
You're looking great in blue shirt.
Well, thank you, Sherry. I appreciate you calling. See, this is what makes sense. A lot of people don't know that Mrs. Professor Messer turns out is Canadian. So I always like the nice people in Canada. I just have something for those Canadians. There's just I just cannot resist them. Let's go back to the United States, the 434 area code. Hello, caller. Which name are you calling from?
Hey, Professor. This is Jerry. I'm calling from Charlottesville, Virginia.
All right, Jerry. What can we do for you?
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to say thank you for everything you do. I was able to pass my 901 exam on July 29th last month. So I just want to say thank you. And I want to tell people the material that I was using. I was using your videos, and I bought your note, and I was using Mike Myers group. So I highly recommend for people to people that if you want to use if people want to use your note, first they need to go and watch your video. Watch your video, then don't just watch the video like watch the whole series. No, watch 3 or 4 videos, then go on the same pattern with your notebook. If you watch a 3 video about CPU and go read the CPU notebook, don't just watch the whole video, then go. You may not understand. That was my strategy. So I was using that, and I was able to pass. So then I don't have any computers any computer skills. That was my first time. So I really thank you for what you do.
That's great news. Congratulations, Jerry. And is that something you were working on, just that single exam? Were you working towards both of those? Was that your second exam that you had passed?
Yeah, that was my second exam.
Oh, okay.
I took the 901 first. After 1 month, then I took the 902.
And you finished it up at the end of July. You just barely got it in under the wire then.
Yes, sir.
Good for you. Congratulations. And congratulations on your A+ certification. And I think your strategy is a good one. It's not just any one thing. It's a mix of things. And I think that's the way we learn best.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jerry. I appreciate the call. Congratulations again.
All right. Bye.
That's always good. I always worry because there's such a flurry of activity at the end of an exam series. As the retirement date is getting closer and closer, there seems to be more and more activity of people trying to close that final exam up. As much as I try to tell people, don't do that. You want to maybe not crunch all of this down into a single date that you have to get. There's a lot of pressure, but some people seem to do well with that level of pressure. They seem to excel as the timing is getting closer and closer. And I'm glad most people were able to tell me, yep, I got it done before the final day snuck in there. And that's always good to hear. Now, though, it's always good to me, though, when we finally hit that final date, that retirement date hits. I left the country. I literally went to go out of the country for that last day to let it tick off. They gave me a chance to kind of recharge for a week or so. And I was glad to come back, and now it's just all the 1000 series. So that's also, there's something that's, for me, easier to manage. Everybody's working towards the same goals with the same objectives. I feel like we're now all in line. We can all work towards getting our A+, and we all know exactly what we need to do. For some reason, I just think there's a little more tightness in the group as we're going in and really working towards that A+ certification. So it's almost like we closed the door. A lot of people were able to take advantage of that, but now another door is open and we can work through the 1000 series. And I'm glad it's here. It's a good place to be. Well, thank you for being here. We went through an hour Q&A. We did the hour call-in. Thank you for doing that. We're going to turn this thing around, do it again on Thursday. We'd love for you to come back. We have our 220-1002 A+ study group on Thursday. For those of you waiting on the replay for this one, we'll get the podcast version out. I'll edit this video so we can get rid of that part where I had to quickly leave and come back. You'll see a new video get posted. I hope later today we'll get it rendered out for you so that you can get those replays. Thanks for being here. Thanks for your input. Thanks for the folks in the chat room and your questions. We would not be able to do this without you. I appreciate you hanging in there. We look forward to seeing you on Thursday. Come back for the 1002. Until then, we'll see you next time on the A+ Study Group.